Happy New Year. So let me talk to you a little bit about January. January is, and I didn't know this, is named after Janus, the Roman god for transitions and beginnings. And he is often depicted with two faces, one looking to the past and reflecting, and one looking forward. And that makes January the perfect name for a month that finishes one year and starts another. And I believe as we go into this year, we have a huge amount to celebrate. We've got a very, very solid start to the year. The best it's ever been, and I've been in open banking since the very beginning. It really is the best it's ever been. Now, I just want to talk about many of the good things that you'll all have heard about in the predictions. So I'm not going to repeat those. But I actually just want to do a bit of scene setting to give my statement, there's a solid start to the year, some context. So we now have very, very clear direction from the National Payments Vision. The Treasury have made it very clear that there is unequivocal support, and they have shown the importance of open banking. So that gives us direction. So in terms of looking forward, that is a very solid start to the year. We're also tantalizingly close to 12 million open banking users. Now, I had actually got that Open Banking Limited had this week released that it was 11.77 million, but I believe that Henk might be updating us on the numbers later, so I'm not going to steal his thunder. But there is one number we all should be celebrating, and that is that open banking is 7 years old, or as Henk likes to say, 7 years young. And really, when you think about it, we have a lot when we look back, as Janus did, to reflect on and how far we've come in those 7 years. We have 7 years of expertise and knowledge to share around the world. We have 7 years of learnings and lessons. I don't want to dwell on those, but when I look, and everybody knows that I, advocate for open banking and UK PLC around the world, but what I would like to stress is the rest of the world look to the UK. Where open banking was born, they look to the UK for direction. And I think that we've got a lot of advice and support that we can give the rest of the world. And going back to the National Payments Vision, they have said that the government has an ambition for the UK to lead in open finance. And I think that is a very, very solid start to the year. If we look across the pond to our friends in America, their regulator, the CFPB, that's the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, thank you, CFPB, they have actually announced that FDX are going to be the standard-setting body. Now, that will have an impact on our industry. Just think of the ripple effect, the impact that will have worldwide. Now, it wasn't without contention that the 1033 ruling came into place, but it is now an inevitability that open banking will happen in the States, and it will, as I've said, impact the rest of the world. If anybody would like to know more about what's happening in the States, they can download our Transatlantic Index, which we produce with Oxford University, our embassies around the world, and our partners Fidelity, or they can speak to me. But it is absolutely vital that this year we absolutely do start to have a sustainable commercial model, particularly when you look at what is happening over the pond. And if we want to retain that leadership position and have that ambition that the government says that we should do to lead the conversation in open finance. But one of the most important, and I would say significant events that is happening this year is the Data Use and Access Bill. So that will be absolutely game-changing for our industry because it helps us with further legislation, and it will be game-changing for us as consumers as well. Making the panel session that we have this evening, I'm going to have how can data sharing deliver better customer outcomes, a superb way to kick off the year. So as we move into open finance, where better to host our first Campfire of the year in Aon? As we move from banking into insurance, mortgages, pensions, Aon at the heart of the insurance world is absolutely fantastic that you have made everybody so very, very welcome. And let me just say a huge thank you to the Aon team, to Ed, who I'm going to pass the mic to, but also to Adolfo, who I'm not sure if he's here, but he has been busy with his team making all the Mastercard cocktails. And we really have one of our other sponsors, Rune, to thank for those. Rune, where are you? Hats off to you, Rune. You have really created a fantastic cocktail and got our evening off to a brilliant start. So without further ado, well done. And yes, it deserves a huge round of applause. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Ed Pugh from Aon, who's going to say a little bit about Aon and welcome you. And then he's going to pass over to Lord Holmes, to Chris, and have a fireside chat with Henk, and then a panel session. And then we're going to wrap up with two very important industry announcements from Charlotte from CFIT, who you needs no introduction, and then from Roger from Money 2020 as well, who's got a call for content. So, Ed, without further ado, over to you. A little short of mics. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen. Well, a very warm welcome to everyone. Welcome to the Aon Centre. Welcome to the Leadenhall building. We can, I think, in Aon lay some small claim to being early adopters of open banking technology. So we were, where's Dan from Moneyhub? Where are you? There you are, of course. So you are...
It's not pantomime season.
We are... Oh, yes, it is. We were early adopters. I think we can lay claim to being Moneyhub's first major client back in the day, weren't we? 7 years ago, right at the outset of open banking and what's evolved into becoming open finance. So the Moneyhub app that we use is available to all Aon employees, and so we have some first-hand experience of the benefits of it, how it can be a tool for positive tool for financial well-being, a tool that provides choice to consumers, and certainly we're here from our financial technology clients that enables innovation. So that's a great thing. We are very excited to welcome Helen and her team, and also to see you again, Chris, the second time in, I think, 6 weeks, to welcome you into the Leadenhall building. Great to see you. As Helen said, the Aon team hosting you here tonight is the Financial Services Group. What do we do? Very simply, we run insurance programs for financial institutions of all shapes and sizes, banks, insurance companies, and also specifically financial technology companies as well. So can I just have a quick show of hands? Who's from Aon here? Where are my Aon colleagues? 2 here. So yeah, there's a smattering us around. Say hi to somebody from Aon, open a conversation, and let's see if there's some way that we could be helping your business. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Chris now. Here you go.
Thank you very much.
There we go.
Magic. Thank you very much, and a very warm welcome to you all. It's a great pleasure to be here. It's all about data sharing. So before I get into a bit of a chat with Henk, it's time for you to share some data. Yes, you've already consented, you've already toggled, you've already radio buttons, you've already done all that. I want to find out a little bit about you. So, are you ready? All of you who are doing dry January, after 3, let me hear you say dry. 1, 2, 3. Dry. Okay. All of you who are doing dry January and are happy about it, after 3, I want you to say happy. 1, 2, 3. You win a special prize. That is commitment, positive. It's day 16 for all the rest of you. Yes, 15 more to go. What are you thinking of? I thought when I came in here, it's an intelligent crowd, it's smart people. You're all gathered in the Leadenhall building, in the hallowed halls of Aon. I thought you're all smart people. Why would you take one of the longest months of the year to not drink alcohol? It's adjacent. You only have to wait for February, which the Roman god of February is called don't drink. So I suppose I should finish off the research because, you want a full data set. Those of you who are not doing dry January, I want to hear you after 3 go, oh yeah, 1, 2, 3. Oh yeah. Now, all of you, as a community, as a collective, you all have the same access and the same level of knowledge of that data. Who believes that there's any doubt whatsoever as to who is the happier cohort? Good. And speaking of happy things, it's a pleasure now to get into some chat with, if anybody could be the physical embodiment of open banking, it would be my good friend here, Henk van Hoel. Great to have you here.
And thank you, Chris.
So,
Aon too.
exactly so. Give us some chat, thoughts on 2024.
2024. For us, a very great year as well in terms of our delivery and particularly also the growth. There was a lot of industry initiative. We kind of reinvigorated a lot of activity in open banking last year. Looking backwards, I think, in 2020 we had about 1 million users in open banking at the end of 2020. At the end of 2022, we had 5 million. And the latest number at the end of 2024, Helen, is 12.07 million.
Whoa.
So we exceeded the kind of...
Give it up for the 12.07 million.
Yeah. So good 7 million in the last 2 years. So if you continue that growth and into 2025, hopefully we can say about 16 million at the end of this year. And then looking at particularly the kind of the move towards payments, because now we're getting really into the payments mode, and 60% is now payments in open banking. So we had a look, and we had about 400 million transactions since launch of open banking payments. And when you look at the run rates today, and it's about 23.5 million a month now, you could argue that we will get another 400 million just in 1 year rather than in 7 years. So you can see the growth also this year in particular on payments. So we're very happy about that. And we get a lot of momentum now in that space. A lot of growth in small businesses penetration as well. So we see now 1 out of 5 small businesses adopting open banking, and 1 out of 7 consumers as well. So that's what we see currently in terms of the results. So good numbers, good growth. Looking forward, of course, to continue that growth as well with the ecosystem beyond 25. Yeah.
So on that note, if we were to be sitting here in January 2026,
yeah,
which I've got a sense we will be.
Yeah.
I think it's good.
Aon will invite us.
Yeah, it's good.
I think
It's
I'm
good.
sure.
We like them.
Yes.
We like them. Good. Have a conversation with an Aon person. Trust me, I've done it. It's good.
Yeah.
So when we're sitting here in 2026,
Yes.
rather than waiting 12 months, what would you want to say?
I've
What's
seen
2025 going to look
Five
like?
will have been. So we have a busy calendar this year, and that's also very good news. So let me just split it in 2 halves this year, and then what I would say next year. So we will have achieved 16 million. We will be having 400 million transactions in payments. But beyond that, I would say, yes, we would have set that foundation for open finance as well. But looking at the more regulatory calendar, perhaps the more boring thing, but we are looking forward in H1 this year in terms of developing further the operator on VRP, which is the MLA. We would like to see that being in implementation. Also, the regulator, PSR, is going to have a look in Q1 in terms of issuing potentially call for views or a consultation on potentially the regulatory mandation of VRP. So they're going to launch that too. So that's particularly in the first half of this year. We need to get going with that, which is very important because that will contribute to the national payment vision as well. where I think it has been declared that open banking is going to be pivotal in designing and launching A2A payments in the country. The other thing, of course, in parallel is the work which is happening, of course, with the bill, and we can look at the bill in a minute, the data bill, where we hope, and perhaps you have the latest information on this, of course, we assume that we might hopefully have royal assent by summer, and that means that we need to start designing the end state of open banking as well. So the long-term regulatory framework, the secondary legislation, and that brings me into the second half of the year, which then would be implemented then or being developed. And we would also, together with the FCA, who would be our one regulator now, which has been also one of the outcomes of the National Payment Division was to have less congestion, regulatory congestion, and the decision to have one regulator for open banking is very helpful. They had actually yesterday their first open banking steering group, being chaired by David Gill from the FCA, so he's the new chair. And we are moving forward then with the design of the end state, I call it, and part of that will be the future entity. So that's the second half of the work of this year, where we need to develop and design the future entity and the end state of open banking. And that brings us to, of course, what that means in terms of the bill and in terms of the long-term regulatory framework and also the long-term commercial sustainability of open banking and the development of a platform, if you want, not a technical platform, but a foundation for, let's call it anything, smart data and sharing, data sharing. And that will be very exciting, particularly the theme of today as well in terms of data sharing, is that we have a regulatory framework for data sharing as well in the UK. Not only open banking, but also beyond open banking. That could be other sectors. It could be, it could be pensions. Who never knows with the new minister. It could be, it could be investments. It could be insurance. It could be, of course, the traditional products such as savings and mortgages. Part of that too. But it could also be other types of data sharing, and we might touch on that later perhaps too, in terms of what I call, rather than vertical sectors, the ones which I just mentioned, but also more the horizontals, like identity, like payments, but also like fraud prevention, where you need data sharing beyond even financial services institutions. And that will be great to have that long-term regulatory framework in place, level up open banking, go beyond open banking and introduce new smart data schemes.
Very good and very clear. Finally, for now from you, if I gave you a golden magic stick, which frustration would you use that stick to flick out of your way?
Ooh,
Chatham House rules, folks. Chatham House rule.
I think it's not easy to get industry alignment, and I think I think we are getting there, and we are good at convening and moving forward. But it would be a bit easier if we get quicker to that engagement. However, I think we have a lot of pace, and I think for a lot of people who want to do great initiatives, and for instance, smart data sharing, even in fraud prevention, or data sharing to improve access to finance, like SME finance, to also develop commercial VRP, etc., all require voluntary funding right now. And that could be mandated one day, but currently the way it's designed right now, and rightfully actually, is to get that balance between regulatory and industry-led. And that frustration is a bit like, okay, yes, it would be good that the industry is leading and that it's funded. And it's also that kind of finding that balance all the time. It would be great to have a magic wand, kind of having that nicely in balance all the time and well funded.
Fantastic, really very clear. And a lot of the things you mentioned there give us an excellent opportunity to open it up to my panel now. We're going to hear more from Henk. We also have Ian from Mastercard and Dan from Moneyhub. One more time. Moneyhub. Excellent. So what I think we'd like to cover a few areas. We're going to be talking financial inclusion. We're going to be talking customer experience. We're going to be talking customer awareness and protection. So if I come to Ian first, perhaps, talk to me about some of the customer needs, customer wants. What are you seeing on the ground right now?
Thanks for having us here. My name's Ian White. I'm from Mastercard. I'm responsible for our open banking business in Europe. So, from a data sharing perspective, I think there are, two kind of pain points that have been around for quite a long time that I think open banking has the potential to solve. Number one is the kind of substance of the data itself. There are a lot of people, for whatever reason, people typically rotate more towards maybe the kind of lower income segments, but there's a lot of non-traditional income, expat workers, for example, thin file people that are, often excluded from typical financial services, whether those be basic bank accounts or lending products. And then secondly, from a process perspective, typically it's very cumbersome to actually, extract your own data, which supposedly you should own, and be able to transfer that to somebody who might be able to offer you a financial product. So I think through open banking, you can essentially solve both of those problems, right? On the first one, you can have access to much richer data in terms of actually providing access to transaction data, but also, isolating that down to, different categories of income, expense, but also particular verticals which may be of interest to different lenders, number one, but also that data is delivered in real time. So I think this is like suddenly a new type of data that just fundamentally hasn't been available today, and we see people using that either standalone or augmenting it with traditional sources of data, for example, credit bureaus. So I think that's one major benefit. The other benefit is just from a user experience perspective. More and more, when we talk to, for example, our financial institutions customers, they are really focused on straight-through processing, increasing kind of lending rates, etc., and therefore being able to offer a fully digital journey, removing the need to download bank statements, manual intervention on pay slips, for example, but just being able to provide, consented access with a trusted third party, with a very slick user experience is a really nice proposition, and we're seeing already great traction there in consumer lending, for example. I think there's a lot of potential to expand that into commercial corporate use cases as well.
Very good. Dan, tell us how Moneyhub are. What are the sort of customer needs that you're solving for right now?
Thank you. So Moneyhub's a data analytics company. So obviously based on a consent-driven data model. So I think the use cases are really vast, and we're seeing people using it for making decisions around lending, affordability, vulnerability, suitability. But we're also seeing it being used for people that want to engage and offer products and services in unique and different ways. I think we will see in the future a complete transition in the way that we approach and deal with customers. So instead of customers proactively looking for providers, you can see a future where, I don't know, I put my mortgage up for permanent auction and anyone can go and offer me a mortgage based on my data. So it's putting me in control of my data, or the consumer in control of their data, to make better, smarter decisions. And I think we're seeing it already. And I would say 2024 was great. We saw some really strong commercial use cases. And 2025 feels like a year where that goes to scale. Whether that's in the payment space, which we're seeing scale quickly, or in the data analytics space, which I think is particularly powerful for the UK economy and more broadly.
And Henk, what are some of the most exciting financial inclusion models and examples you see coming across your desk?
Yeah, I just want to focus also on what we call underserved segments as well, so even beyond financial inclusion. But so perhaps we haven't really touched on SMEs, for instance. That's mainly we talked about consumers here. But I see a lot of uptake within SMEs and adoption. And this is where also the future work is helpful with CFIT in terms of, the access to capital, SME finance, integration with cloud accounting softwares. There is more and more innovation in the market where they bulk up data points and then ensure, for instance, payroll is done in one go, for instance, for the SMEs, which is helpful and reduces the cost to SMEs as well. And management, reduce optimization of their cash flow through giving access to those cloud accounting software packages to accountants. You see a lot of uptake there and a lot of benefits, which is helpful because then, if you can help the SMEs reduce their cost base and have access to capital as well, that would be very helpful for the growth agenda of the government as well going forward. So that's definitely a segment I'm looking at, what we see in the industry growing. The other one is indeed, more the thin files, more the non-discriminatory lending, as we call it nowadays, in terms of key workers in the industry, public servants or NHS workers getting access to finance too, whether it's up to £1,000 a year, for instance. That's very helpful, particularly in these times of cost of living being very, having an impact on people, and that's helpful because that segment gets access to finance as well, and there are providers then also checking whether or not that segment might also benefit from some benefits, and whether they have missed benefits as well, and that helps them again. So these underserved segments. So that's quite an interesting one, and it's particularly also non-discriminatory, meaning some very, also a bit female biased in a way, where these customer bases look more like helping domestic budgets as well. Yeah.
Brilliant. No, thank you very much. And Dan, perhaps you could say a bit more about how you're using data right now and how you'd like to use data and currently maybe aren't able to use data, how that would be potentially helped by the data bill.
Perfect. Yeah. So, I agree with the underserviced point, although I would argue that all of us are underserviced. You need to look at the data to see people have got huge sums of money sat in current accounts to tell you that we're not servicing our customers properly. And even with the consumer duty, we still haven't seen the improvements that we deserve and that we expect. So to me, I think the open data access bill coming through is really important, because putting consumers in control of their data is what they are asking for. They want control, they want to understand. But when we talk about underserviced people, we're talking about people that either can't be bothered, don't have time, or don't have the skills to be able to look after themselves. So they're looking to who can help me. And you can see that in the data. Whenever we launch new services, people absolutely adore using open banking, not because it's open banking, in the same way people adore using trains, not because they love train tracks, but they like going on holiday, or they like coming to see all of you lovely lot. And so to me, the access to data allows them to then entrust that data to somebody else in order to help them. And at the moment, we're really struggling because it's inconsistent how you share that data. And so you get consumers feeding back saying, well, this is great for my Lloyd's account. I can share my Lloyd's current account, brilliant. But I'd like to also share my investments to be able to explain to somebody, what should I do next? And the way you share investment data at the moment is convoluted and difficult. So I think the future is bright, because the future is it's consistent, it's clear, and from the point of view for the consumer, they know what they're doing, and then they're empowered to get other regulated entities to help them.
And Ian, positive about the future and what could be, to carry on that analogy, coming down the track?
Yeah. No, look, absolutely. I think, Henk already talked about it on the intro, about the momentum that we have coming out of 2024, and some really kind of positive trends that I think should continue that momentum, whether that be the adoption, whether that be some of the new technology, continued regulatory focus. I think we also have a number, probably a bit more on the payment side, but a number of industry-wide initiatives like EPI, Wero, for example, which I think together with more and more adoption of other alternative payment methods, start to almost position account-to-account open banking payments, however you want to define it, as a table stakes factor. I think from a data perspective specifically, we see this in probably two broad groups today. One is some standalone data services. I think we talked already a lot around some of the lending propositions, but also some other propositions that help either with customer acquisition, like onboarding, for example, and being able to streamline enrollment of customers, but also driving a little bit of engagement through like linking to other accounts to draw more information into the consumer. And then on the payment side, more and more, whether that be our merchant customers or our PSP distributor customers, we're seeing more and more demand for what we would in some ways call like payment enablement through data. So being able to, validate payees or payers up front, authenticated direct debits, for example, really trying to optimize in some ways some of those legacy account-to-account payments. So I see that as already an enormous runway. I mean, if you were to look at the volumes of payouts or direct debits across Europe, it is very, very significant. So that is a massive opportunity that is already in some ways capturable based on the current toolkit we have. But exactly to the points just mentioned, I mean, there's an enormous runway of opportunities, probably one of the reasons why there's so many people in the room, interested to understand what's happening.
No, for sure, it's a good way to take us on to our next subject, all around customer experience. And we're all guilty of this to an extent. We all want flexibility, but then we all want control. We all want choice, but then we all want help, guidance. So how do we navigate through this customer experience? So Dan, what do you want your customers to feel? How do you solve for that? It's not a dichotomy, but certainly it's a tension.
So it is really difficult. We do a lot of work in the pension space. Pensions companies love to put lots of caveats on things and explain that the future isn't definite. And the downside to that is we're doing it to protect the vulnerable, and I get that, it's important, but we do that at the expense of everybody else. So what happens? People just do nothing, because it's way easier to do nothing than to do something. So we're doing everyone a disservice. So for me, the future looks to make doing something easier. Part of that is using open banking, open data, open finance, open whatever we want to call it. Can we not call it open? It's a terrible name. But using that data to just automate even the boring bits that people don't want to do. Form filling. We can do that now instantly. No more applications for mortgages where you have to send off bank statements. It's a click of a button, instant decision. But we can take that even further and do more. And I think where we're seeing the future, and we're already seeing this, is using tools that can simplify things to the level that somebody wants it. So if I want something explained to me as if I'm a 12-year-old, I can now ask to have it explained to me as if I'm a 12-year-old. If I feel quite confident, I might ask to have it explained to me as if I'm a financial advisor. I don't know why I'd do that. But that's where the future lies. So now we get to engage with people at scale in their own preferred style, way, interaction, and in a way that they can really, truly understand. And most importantly, and this is my plea to everyone in the industry, and then let them take some action. Let's not make it difficult. Let's make it safe. Let's protect them, but let's not prevent them. And that is what we're seeing at the moment, is prevention over execution. So let's be pragmatic, progress over anything else.
No, very, very clear. And I apologise to the panel on something you just said there. I'm going to come to you, Ian, but I should really ask before I ask the question. What age would you like me to ask this question to you in?
What are the options?
I mean, to be honest, I struggle to get above the level of a 12-year-old anyway, so pretty much you've had to deal with that so far, so we'll stick with that. Customer experience, tell us, what's your view on bringing that to life, both currently and with the changes coming down the line?
Yeah, look, I mean, I kind of touched on that on one of the previous questions. I think customer experience, as with anything, is absolutely critical to get it right. And I think, as an industry, open banking probably generally has been maybe a bit guilty of kind of like always over-rotating towards the next feature or functionality that's going to come down the road that's going to like suddenly unlock everything. But I think what we've seen recently, and I say recently over the last maybe 12 to 24 months, is we've seen actually, a lot of innovation that's already coming on the current scope. And what we've seen there is people, of course, that's been helped by the different partners across the industry, improving the quality and the availability of the services that are available. But we've seen, service providers get much smarter in terms of how we streamline the UX as much as possible, removing unnecessary friction, getting smarter in terms of how like consumer consents are positioned into the overall journey, so it's more natural for the consumer. And so I think that is that is a really key driver. And I think more and more people have actually like started to deliver value propositions which are a little bit more holistic. If you look at some of maybe the early use cases, it was around very basic stuff, balances, transactions, etc., in an aggregated fashion, which I think is nice and tidy. But I think where the real value was delivered over time is when you started combining that with real hooks that added value to the consumer, like combining wealth services, for example, driving loyalty programs, etc., etc. So I think that's a whole picture of like consumer experience and value that is really starting to drive a little bit of traction. And of course, I think two things are going to happen. We're going to get smarter at that in terms of how we continually optimize the UX. There's lots of bits and pieces around return users and other bits of functionality that can help with that. But I think continuing to expand the scope, as you mentioned, the regulation, by adding in more and more services that can in some ways complete the picture and deliver on the full promise. We already see that in other markets like Brazil, for example. Very, very different situation than the UK, of course. So that wouldn't want to emphasise that too much. But they are showing the potential of what's to come.
Obrigado for that.
Yeah.
It's language is easier than I thought, to be honest. Gracias. We can't really talk customer experience without talking AI. I mean, really, we can't talk much about talking AI. So, Hank, how do you see AI impacting and interacting with the open banking, open finance journey?
I think, well, the beauty of open banking, of course, is that it's structured, standardized. And I think that's what you all need when you look at AI, any AI, if you already consider, of course, AI to be used. But you need, so these systems need, a lot of data, and they need structured data, and you need to refeeding those systems and those bots with more and more data. So I think, expanding indeed beyond open banking means that we need to think about, we just had the conversation on the customer experience. I think looking at it from a convener in the industry and from an industry perspective, but also from a standard perspective, is that we need consistency in the customer experience and consistency in the delivery so that we can fuel these new developments, the AI bots going forward. And that requires not only a lot of standardization, that also requires rules, that requires integrity of the data. You actually need to certify and accredit some of that data before it even goes into it, because you will have a biased view, etc., etc. So it opens up a plethora of things, and I know it's close to your heart as well in terms of AI authorities and all the other things, which we can discuss as well if you want in the panel. But I think before you jump into the very sexy AI kind of approach, you need the plumbing to work. You need a lot of plumbing, and you need a lot of consistent data to go and flow through it as well. So there's a lot to be done. Additional data sets as well to make it an embedded solution, and to ensure that actually AI adds value, because that's often disrespected. And I think in our business it will be, I think 58% of consumers want personalization in financial services, and about 91% of the companies use AI to improve productivity by streamlining back office work, front office work, and fraud prevention again. So that's where I think AI will be big in our business.
No, incredibly important, and well done for getting sexy and plumbing into the same sentence there. That was quite something. Dan, AI in Moneyhub, tell us.
So it doesn't seem that long ago that if someone said, "Oh, we're thinking of using one of your competitors because they're AI," I'd be like, "You do realise AI is just maths, right? It's not that exciting." But the world has moved on so much in just the last few years, and the use of large language models is just astounding. If you've not played around with them, I definitely recommend having a look. And you can see by some of the early work in that, it's really, the data is so important. Getting the foundations right is so important. And also being able to lock down and understand it. You can't just absolve yourself of not understanding something. So I think locking down the data set to just that person's data is so important to stop hallucinations. But the early results of that are just incredible. So putting pensions data through from a pensions dashboard point of view and having that data played back to you in a way that, again, in a way you understand and in a way you can digest, it's just going to help people understand, and understanding will lead to action, and action will lead to better results. I think we have to be pragmatic about how we get there, and there needs to be, like the biggest risk is somebody in the industry rushes out to say, look, we've done something, and makes a mess of it and ruins it for everyone else. That is by far my biggest worry. But those that are doing it well and doing it properly, I think the results are going to be astounding. And I also think the fact that we can effectively, you can see a future not that million miles away where we make virtual Dans, who are a lot cleverer than the actual Dan, can go out and look for financial products and services that suit my lifestyle, that suit my needs. So I don't have to be an expert anymore because I can get that guidance. And I use guidance quite purposefully because I think there will still be a need for the agent to be able to say, yeah, you're too complex, go somewhere else. I think that's fine. But for the vast majority of, I need some insurance, well, I need it to cover these things, it knows. I need it to be cheap as it can be. And let me know if there's anything I've not thought of. Like, oh, by the way, Dan, you do realise the industry's changed and there's this new thing available you might want to know. So I think in the future we're going to see a lot of innovation, and I actually think that's great as long as we get there in steps.
No, very good. I'm just going to have one more question with our panel, and I'm going to come to you guys for questions. So do you have your questions ready and waiting to go? Ian first, AI, Mastercard. What's the story?
I might need the 5-year-old version of that question, but no. Look, AI is obviously a big part of the future for us. Don't quote me on this, but I believe open banking, if not the biggest, maybe certainly one of the biggest consumers of AI today at Mastercard. And so I think, to Dan's point, it shows kind of like the power that it has for our product suites. I think Dan already talked about some of the kind of customer-facing optimizations that have come from AI, so I maybe can talk to a bit about how we use it today, and it's really on the kind of productivity front. If I give an example around lending and credit decisioning, to go back to that one, it was in the past, a very manual process to actually build a data model that had, the correct level of understanding around spend and income patterns in a particular market. It's not by surprise that, you might need to localize that for Germany with different segments of merchants than you might in the UK. And fundamentally, in the past, it was a very manual process of having labelers label that data, and then iteratively, you'd have to train that model to get much better. So with AI and related tools, we're able to accelerate that product development process much quicker, number one. But also, number two, you can really see in real time the consumer proposition improving much, much better. If you think about like eligibility or affordability type processes, the kind of like preliminary models may be able to categorize 60, 70% or so of consumer income and expenses, very quickly in different markets. You can get that up into 95, 99 or so%. So that has a massive knock-on impact, like to the value to the consumer, to streamline the processes overall, but results in better decisions and better outcomes for the FI customers as well.
No, very clear. So one final question before I come to our guests for questions, and maybe just a couple of sentences from each of you on this. Looking at customer and consumer awareness and protection, how do we really look to resolve the issues around digital literacy, financial literacy? It seems to me that if we can create the best tools with that real understanding of financial inclusion and customer experience and the customer, the individual at the very heart of everything we do, those tools will inevitably create a virtuous circle. But Dan, tell me of your view on that.
Well, very briefly, I completely agree. If you make financial services easy to engage with and easy to use, and I feel confident I'm making the next best action, the next best step, I'm going to find it interesting. I'm going to engage with it more. I'm going to learn about it. I'm going to talk to people about it and get them interested and excited. So I think absolutely we need to talk more about money. We don't. But one of the best ways to do that is to give people some success stories to talk about, and then other people will get interested too.
Excellent. Ian.
Yeah, look, fully agree. I mean, clearly, financial inclusion is a great thing, but, it needs to make sure that it's still the next best action for that individual consumer. And look, I don't think open banking, open data is really reinventing anything here. There's a long track record of new innovation, new product development coming to the market in the UK, but, broader. And I think they've demonstrated the tools to make sure that these are delivered in a kind of responsible way that works for the consumer, for business, for the economy overall.
Very good. Hank, final word for now.
Well, for me, I'd just step up a little bit. I think before we just look at awareness and tools and so on for the illiterate, etc., I think it's the trust in the system, the trust in using these tools, the trust in trusting that open banking will work. It's very basic that you can, we need a trusted ecosystem in many. So the value of data sharing will only happen if you can trust that my data will create value for me. But do I trust the system and the tools to do so, even when I don't know the tools? So trust is very key in this market.
Very good indeed. Right, let's have your questions. If you indicate to Helen that you'd like to ask a question, she will indicate in some way, I've got no idea how, back. You can ask that question. Please, you make your indications. Helen, make your indications back to them. Let's have some questions.
Right, I've got a mic, so who's going to be the first one? Oh, Dan. Okay, please, everybody knows you, Dan, but please say your name and where you're from.
Dan Feeney, Feeney FinTech. I'm not going to talk about digital identity, but it is kind of the elephant in the room. This week, we're on our 5th FinTech envoy to government, from John to Andrew, from BIM to Tulip, and now Emma. What would the panel say to Emma? I hope she's here tonight, but maybe there's people writing notes for her, but this is a problem.
Great question. Henk, you may be the first. Oh, the microphone's on. I can speak about a microphone. Henk, what would you say to Emma tomorrow?
Well, I would say to Emma that...
Good luck in your new job, Emma. We're all wishing you luck.
I think there's a lot to deal with, but I think identity, first of all, is already mentioned in the bill, so we need to remind her of that. So it's a very important move to make because it's part of that bill as well. Even identity is mentioned in the National Payment Vision because it's linked to payments, which is very important for her to be reminded as well. And the last thing we probably need to remind her of the whole kind of DCIT department in the government as well, which is focusing on developing a digital identity and attributes trust framework, which is very helpful because just coming back to the conversation I had on trust, and that a regulatory framework would be set up. So that the bill is there, and I understand that the bill, will even be particularly on both health and identity. We'll have some inclusions potentially or amendments, and that might actually delay a little bit the thing, but nevertheless we'll embed it into it, which is very important too. So there are good things happening on that front.
But I'm sure we all wish her luck in a new role because we want her to succeed and we need her to succeed. Paula, do you have a comment about digital ID? If I give you the mic, I'm not putting you on the spot. I am really.
So thank you. I think it is absolutely the elephant in the room. So Paula Sussex, Chief Exec of OneID. We think without identity, none of this really works. So getting it embedded, whether open banking or through another technology, absolutely key. It's the spine of everything we're trying to do here. Thanks, Helen.
You're very welcome. Do we have one more question? Oh. Sam, please say hello.
Hello, I'm Sam Manning from Hope Macy. I was going to ask about the potential flaws in the data bill because, unlike the PSR, there was a requirement for the banks to cooperate. They had no option, whereas the data bill seems about a consent model for sharing data. but it's the extraction of the data in the first place that the PSR enabled, whereas the data bill doesn't really allow for that. So from a practical point of view, I don't see how it actually works.
Probably one for you, Hank, in
Yeah.
the first instance.
So directly it doesn't indeed, as you say, but when you look at it, the basis of it is to give powers to, so once the bill will go through in Royal Assent, then secondary legislation need to be written, and within that there will articulate what the powers will be that will be given to secretaries of state or ministers or regulators even, and in particular the first one, and that was promised to us, there will be financial services and open banking, because open banking is already a smart data scheme. You now need to level it up. It needs to get a regulatory framework. So the example here is that the FCA needs the powers to set up that scheme, if you want, or to elevate the scheme or level it up, and also then to decide what the powers are going to be. And powers could be mandation, that's not the word I know, but mandating, and it could be mandating participation. It could also be mandating contribution, financial contribution and funding to certain schemes that are being set up. So the secondary legislation will allow these powers to be exerted by future regulators and current regulators.
Brilliant. Can you join with me? I don't know if I'm on. I'm not on. Yeah, technology.
Well, Helen,
Hear me?
Let me do the honours.
No, I can do it. I don't need a microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, one positive thing to take from this, and I think we should take data from wherever we can get it. If you take the initial letter of Ian and Dan's first name, you get ID. There's a sign in there, and ditto tomorrow, apropos nothing in particular, but maybe it's to do with everything. Tomorrow, I'm getting a train that leaves at 10:33. Yeah, all these things mean something. But please, for now, join with me in thanking our panel, Henk, Ian, Dan. Thank you very much.
They've worked really hard, haven't they? And if the panel would just stay there, would you like me to introduce Charlotte? Charlotte Crosswell, OBE, needs no introduction. She's going to take my mic in a moment and give you an update on CFIT and all the amazing things that CFIT are doing. So Charlotte, please come up. Please give Charlotte a big warm round of applause.
Thank you, Helen. Great to see you all on the panel. Thanks for the invite, and I appreciate I'm standing between you, a lucky saint. Next edition of The Traitors, if anyone's onto that. But no, I just wanted to give you a quick update on CFIT and appreciate the opportunity. And in full disclosure, for those who haven't seen my role, so I do have to disclose it because of any conflicts, I've recently taken over as chair of Radium as well. So that's out there, and the Radium team's here today. So coalitions, for anyone who knows what CFIT's been up to, our first coalition, which we published a year ago, was on open finance. We very much quickly factored into a lens of SME finance, the view being there was so much to be done around that and such an opportunity. And I'm really happy to say that a lot of those recommendations have been taken forward. We took that into a task force on SME finance. And I'm now actually slightly kicking myself, or probably wasn't ambitious enough on the recommendations, because pretty well all of them in some form have been taken forward, either through the NPV or the budget. So we'll go a bit bigger next time. And I think things that are relevant for this room are bank referral scheme is now going to be reviewed and consultation launched, as well as the CCDS. And for those who were involved in CBILS and bounce back loans back in the day, and everyone kept saying, oh my goodness, if only this scheme's worked, we could have done this. I think there is a real opportunity for banks and fintechs to come back with some strong recommendations on that. NPV, obviously great to see that out at last, slightly delayed obviously by new government coming in and waiting for the Mansion House speech, but some positive things in there. And open finance does have, it does feature in there, which I think it wouldn't have done a few months before. So that's a really positive thing. So do read paragraph 3.18 for those who want to read about it, where it sort of got put in, and it doesn't really sit naturally anywhere, but it got put in very much the view being that we have to be ambitious, and the UK has led the world in open banking. We're not leading the world in open finance. I think we all know that. But I think there is an aspiration to do that, and certainly conversations with the new government will continue with that with more economic secretaries. We like economic secretaries; they go far and wide. But Emma Reynolds, who I don't know if anyone does know her, she's been in the City. She worked at City UK. She is well versed on this. She's heard a lot about open banking in her role back then. So we have got someone there who understands the City, understands a lot of people, and what they want in this room. So I think that's a positive for me. And obviously it has featured on the Financial Services Review, which Ron Khalifa has done a pretty good job in inserting some stuff in there. So that's positive. Going on to Coalition 2, which we've been working on, and thank you to everyone who's been around the table on that one, looking at sort of links between preventing economic crime and digital ID. Just bear in mind that we were looking at digital ID only, but there was a real opportunity to sort of look at this through a lens of not trying to do everything with digital ID, which in a year of transition of government is always a little risky. But the economic crime piece is obviously so key. Can we verify who we're actually dealing with and what's the impact of that? And thank you to so many people who sat around the coalition table. That blueprint is going to be published on beginning of March. I've seen the early draft of that, so there's lots of work going on that at the moment. And some great opportunities. And more recently, and great to see Mastercard's brand up here, we obviously have announced our first industry funders for CFITs. The first ones coming in, they've gone public, Mastercard and Lloyds. And thank you to those in this room who supported that. That's really important for CFIT because that's moving us away from just government funding into looking at coalitions that industry wants to do and industry wants to sponsor and take that work forward. The model stays the same. We still crowd people in, obviously, but really important to the, what was it, the golden stick you called it, Chris? Hank has. So hopefully we'll have quite a few. Can I have it? Great, perfect. A few golden sticks would be good, and hopefully we'll be sort of waving them in many directions and moving this forwards. As I always say to the Treasury, I want to start moving things on at industry pace, which is my way of saying, can we move this on not at government pace? I think it's really important that industry has a lot of the answers. Yes, of course, we need government to legislate, and that's why the data bill is so key. Occasionally, we need them to convene. I think we're quite good at doing that, but it is, they do have a very powerful role, and sometimes they have to mandate, and sometimes they have to fund, and we've got to work on that. But they don't have the solutions. There is no magic team that sits in government when you send open letters in that takes it in and go, great, I'll go and work on that. Because when that does happen, it tends to slow things down anyway. So I think we all have a responsibility to be really positive, but actually show the solutions, show the use cases, the proof of concepts. I'm looking forward to working on that. So next coalition for us, as I said, being led by Mastercard and Lloyds currently, will be taking that work on SME finance into the next phase, actually starting to really build out those solutions. And that's going to be really key because this data sharing piece is obviously key to all of that. Most people know I'm a big lover of digital ID. I have held back for a long time waiting for the opportune moment to go and push the button on that because it can be a political hot potato, as we know. And when that happens, sometimes it can get quashed for many, many years. The fact that DSIT's come out and said we're going to do age verification, and I'm really happy that it's someone, it's gone with a place where people need it and want it, I think that's now triggered the starting gun, and I think that's super exciting. So really interested in talking to people about how CFIT can play a role in driving that forward and what use cases and proof of concepts we can build. And on top of that, there's tokenization, there's dematerialization, there's AI. How does that interact with smart data? I think that's quite a key one. I did pose that question to Matt Clifford on Monday. We must make sure that the data we're all working on and getting access is going to be interacting with that AI strategy. As I understand it, UKRI is going to be putting a huge amount of their funds into AI and only AI. So again, what does AI look like in financial services? And as everyone says, the worst AI you are ever going to use is the one you're using now. So, exciting year ahead. Said appreciate all the support everyone's done to get CFIT to where it is. Ultimately, it's an organisation that is there to drive things on for industry, that industry wants to see. We sit at the intersection, obviously, of industry, government and regulators. It's there to drive, as I said, industry pace at speed. I am getting too old to wait much longer. So I haven't got 30 years ahead of me anymore, or maybe the AI predictive tool says I have, I don't know. But I think there is an impatience to drive this forward, and let's be ambitious. Let's not beat ourselves up and look back, but let's move forward. Thank you.
Charlotte, thank you very, very much. Really appreciate you giving that update. Thank you. Before we wrap up, I want to invite Roger from Money 2020. I want to introduce you to Roger because he's new to the Money 2020 team, and I had a VIP seat down here waiting for you, Roger. I'm going to pass you the mic, and it is my absolute privilege. We work very closely with Money 2020. But as he's new, I wanted to introduce you to him and let him tell you about a lot of the things that are going to be happening in Amsterdam this year. Over to you, Roger.
Thank you so much, Helen. And thanks for organising a fantastic event and letting me speak to your wonderful community. Greg, if you'd be so kind. So while he's putting that together, Money 2020, if you aren't aware, is the world's leading fintech event series. We organise a show in Europe at Amsterdam every June. That is the largest gathering of fintech decision makers on the continent. I work on a commercial team there, but I'm here today to let you know about a free opportunity of the show, which is our call for speakers. That opened a week ago, and I just want to kind of run through 4 of the key topics we'll be exploring across our 5 stages, and then a few tips for your submissions. Just bear with me a few seconds. And if we can skip through that one. So, yeah, there's 4 pillars, we call them, interchangeable word really, with themes or topics. First one is embedded intelligence. I'm just going to keep this super summative. What we're really looking at here is the impact of AI on the industry, and in particular, anything that you might have to contribute around smart data, customization, APIs, and I guess the influence, opportunities and challenges of the various touch points now that are more personalized, fast, and easy for customers within the finance space. Next one, please, Greg. Secondly, we're looking at digital DNA. Fraud is at an all-time high, and that raises all sorts of challenges for the industry. So cybersecurity, ID solutions, biometrics, personalized data. If that resonates with your solutions, we'd love to hear about it. One more time, please. And we have governance 3.0. This is where we're looking at regulation of stuff like digital currencies. Obviously, there's an ethics piece here as well, and yeah, how governments and regulators control risks in this space. Last one, please, Greg. We've got Beyond FinTech, and this is where we're looking at innovation and the future of money, frankly. So really gazing towards where the industry will be in 5 to 10 years. Let's say this is where we're really looking for the most innovative solutions and speakers, if you like, with a nod towards crypto, stablecoins, tokenization, and the changing demographics and technology, and how that will have an impact as well. And then if we can just wrap up with just a few tips on your applications. We really want you to leverage your network. So if you have partners, celebrities, sports stars, industry leaders, we would love to hear from them, because more importantly, we know our audience does too. Please offer a pragmatic takeaway and really keep the audience at the heart of your submission. It's not about what you as an organisation will get from the session. It's about what the attendees will from watching it. Lastly, the 3 R's, right people talk about the right topic at the right time. And on that note, almost ready to break. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. You didn't need a prompt to give him a hand. My job now is to wrap things up. So let me do that quite quickly because I know Aon have got some more food and drink waiting for you. First of all, let me again thank Lord Holmes, Chris, Henk, Ian and Dan, an absolutely superb panel session, and of course Nancy. And also Charlotte and Roger. But I would like to say a very huge and heartfelt thank to our sponsors. Aon, you've been absolutely magnificent. It is an absolute pleasure to work with your team. Everybody talks about seamless in this industry. It has been seamless. It really, really has. Please give Aon a huge, huge thank you. And then the two other sponsors, Mastercard have been by our sides since we started. And I see David Head in the audience. Many of you remember David Head and I would, he was my right-hand man, and we would be serving pizzas out of boxes. David, we've come quite a way since then, haven't we? We're now, thanks to Mastercard and our other sponsors, the world's largest and most engaged community of over 50,000. So a huge thank you for Mastercard. We could not have done it without you. You've just done your cocktails. They deserve a huge thank you. And of course, Moneyhub, and we've run a brilliant roundtable with Moneyhub, and Chris was hosting it, and Charles Randall as well. So a huge thank you. We are running a competition. The winner will be randomly selected, and you can either win an afternoon tea at the Ritz for two or a charity equivalent. And you'll see a promo about that whilst you're drinking your drinks. And that is for all you budding photographers out there to actually take some photos, share them on social media, and share them with us. So can I just say a huge thank you for making it such a wonderful evening. And it has been fantastic to see you all, and I'm hoping we can create that buzz again. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much. Thank you.